Welcome back to Crossroads. Today I'll be going into updates regarding the Hunter Biden laptop allegations, among many other stories, so stay tuned. The laptop of Hunter Biden, son of Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, has now been verified by several sources, including by congressional staffers and by cross-referenced Secret Service logs. And a White House advisor has warned that Taiwan should prepare against a possible invasion from China. And currently in the United States, there are forces at work that look to radically remake the nation. Yet according to Curtis Bowers, the director of Agenda Grinding America Down, these movements should have been expected. I'll be interviewing him on this. Welcome back, everyone. First off, the laptop of Hunter Biden, son of Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, has now been verified by several sources, including by congressional staffers and by cross-referenced Secret Service logs. Now, several legacy news outlets wrote stories claiming the laptop scandal was Russian disinformation, yet with the caveat that they have no evidence of it being Russian disinformation. The FBI and Department of Justice, meanwhile, have stated it does not appear to be Russian disinformation, and the FBI confirmed it has possession of Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, this laptop and emails on it are raising allegations that Hunter Biden capitalized on Joe Biden's former position of vice president for profit, including with large-scale deals in China, Russia, and Ukraine, along with allegations of quid pro quo and also sex trafficking. Now, staff members for Representative Jim Jordan, a Republican from Ohio, have independently authenticated emails from the laptop. Jordan told reporters in an October 20th conference call, quote, "Our staff has had numerous conversations which have independently confirmed for us that in fact these emails are real, they're authentic," and said he and his office are confident that the emails are accurate. Now, the New York Post had published the first story on these allegations after it received a copy of a hard drive from Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani that allegedly contained emails, photos, and other files. These in turn allegedly came from Giuliani's personal attorney, Robert Costello, who obtained a computer at a repair shop in Delaware where the shop owner said Hunter Biden dropped off 3 laptops in April 2019 for data recovery, then never returned to pick them up. Now, the shop owner, John Paul McIsaac, then handed the devices over to the FBI in December 2019. And along with the laptop files, he also provided Giuliani with a copy of the alleged subpoena the FBI used to obtain the laptop and a receipt that was allegedly signed by Hunter Biden. Now, we did reach out, but Giuliani declined to provide the Epoch Times with a copy of the hard drive, and so we haven't been able to independently verify the contents on the files ourselves. Now, that said, however, going by what's been released so far, Secret Service logs do align with the claims. In one of these alleged emails from April 13, 2014, Hunter Biden wrote to his business partner, Devon Archer, he would travel to Houston the following day. And Secret Service logs obtained by the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs do show that Biden took a trip on that date. In another alleged email, a top executive from Ukrainian gas firm Burisma wrote to Biden and Archer on May 12, 2014, and says that following their talks during a visit to Lake Como, he was requesting to bring a, quote, situation to his attention. And while the email doesn't include the date of that trip, Secret Service logs do include a travel entry for Biden on April 3rd to 6th in 2014. And in another alleged email, Archer wrote on May 12, 2014 that he was in Doha, Qatar with Biden. And the Secret Service logs do show that Biden took a trip to Doha, Qatar on May 11th to 14th in 2014. Now, as the story unfolds, legacy news outlets have on one side claimed the email and laptop scandal is Russian disinformation. Yet they've also stated they have no evidence of it being Russian disinformation. And on the other hand, they've largely ignored the reports in their coverage. Newsbusters found that on October 14th and 15th, just after the initial story broke, out of the total 92 hours of news programming from ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and MSNBC, they only spent 9 minutes and 47 seconds on the report. It notes that CNN and ABC ignored the report completely on those days. Now, also Fox News producer Sean Lengo claimed over Twitter that the FBI and Department of Justice said the laptop and emails were not part of a disinformation campaign, and also confirmed the FBI does have, again, the Hunter Biden laptop in its possession. Also, the Washington Examiner also reported that the reports were confirmed by a federal law enforcement official. And also adding to this, Rudy Giuliani is now claiming as well in an interview with Newsmax that the Hunter Biden hard drive contained images of underage girls. And Giuliani said he handed the evidence over to the Delaware State Police.
And he says, she told my therapist that I was sexually inappropriate. This would be with a unnamed 14-year-old girl.
You turned it over to the Delaware State Police, correct?
Yes, yesterday. Bernie Kerik and I turned it over to the Delaware State Police because we're very uncomfortable with this.
Now, folks, again, we're getting updates on this as things go forward, so we'll keep reporting on this as new information comes out. Now, meanwhile, in China, the regime's Ministry of Science and Technology is now confirming the CCP virus has mutated. And questions are now being raised on whether the virus has mutated beyond the range of the vaccines the CCP has been developing. Now, according to Sina in China, the state council, which is kind of like the government, but it's also still under the CCP, held a press conference on October 20th about the situation of the vaccine. And during this, Ministry of Science and Technology Department of Social Development Deputy Director Tian Bao-guo said the virus has mutated, but he claimed that it was not beyond the reach of the vaccine the CCP has been developing. Chinese state media Xinhua, meanwhile, claimed the mutations had not had a, quote, substantial impact on vaccine research and development, and also claimed that 60,000 people were vaccinated without, quote, serious adverse reactions. Now, also in some other news, when it comes to the CCP's aggression, White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien is saying Taiwan should prepare against a possible invasion from China. Now, O'Brien said during an Aspen Institute event that he believes, quote, Taiwan needs to start looking at some asymmetric and anti-access area denial strategies and so on, and really fortify itself in a manner that would deter the Chinese from any sort of amphibious invasion or even a gray zone operation against them. Now, he explained that a gray zone operation could include, for example, strategic use of economic isolation. Analysts are also warning that the Chinese Communist Party could move against Taiwan if the United States falls into a political chaos from the 2020 elections. Among these warnings is from Peter Sweeney, opinion editor and columnist for Reuters Asia, who says, quote, the next black swan is a Chinese attack on Taiwan. He adds that, quote, signals coming out of Beijing suggest this is on the table. In some ways, it makes sense for the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, to go soon, because U.S. disarray has opened a window that won't stay open forever, and time is not on China's side. As we've reported previously, the Chinese regime is trying to turn Shenzhen into the new Hong Kong, after it lost many of its special trade deals with the rest of the world following its policies to forcefully end Hong Kong's autonomy. And as part of this new shift, the Chinese Communist Party is rolling out a new trial of its digital currency in Shenzhen. Now, the CCP has been trying to build this new currency that's independent of the global financial system, that's dominated by the US dollar, really, and which China sees as a vulnerability when it comes to sanctions. Now, this new digital currency, which is controlled by the central bank in China, also allows the Communist Party to monitor all purchases and block payments as it sees fit. It gives the CCP full control over its currency. Now, as part of the new rollout in Shenzhen, the local government gave out 10 million yuan in these digital payments to 50,000 randomly selected residents, with each getting around 200 yuan to spend. Now, as Investing Business Daily reports, this move suggests the full launch of this experimental currency may be coming soon. Now, this rollout also aligns with the recent visit by CCP leader Xi Jinping, and with the Central Committee's release of a 5-year blueprint for the city in Shenzhen, which they titled, quote, Shenzhen Pioneers in an Experiment of Chinese-Specific Socialism. Now, Quartz report that Shenzhen appears to be a controlled area for the CCP to experiment. It was where former CCP leader Deng Xiaoping tested his so-called reform and opening up strategy. That was when the CCP basically took its businesses out of control of just the PLA, the Chinese military, and made some private industry to an extent. And Xi is now using Shenzhen also as a testing ground for the CCP's Hong Kong replacement through the creation of this new special economic zone. Now, at the same time as this, Xi's visit on October 14th seemed to be a propaganda stunt for the CCP in order to frame perceptions around the state of China's economy. Now, videos posted to Twitter, which is notably banned in China, showed Xi greeting local residents on a pedestrian walkway who surrounded him without wearing masks. Now, among Chinese netizens, Photo ops like this are often seen as being staged. It's often the case that people chosen for these photo ops turn out to be CCP officials or people related to them. The area where the video was taken is also one of the city's less wealthy spots. So what's the message Xi is sending with this? He's saying it's a prosperous area, people are happy to see me, they believe, they're happy about the future, they like where things are going, and there's no pandemic, no wearing masks, everything's well and fine. And as the CCP sets up Shenzhen as its new economic hub, the shifts could give us hints about its plans for the future of Hong Kong as well. Now keep in mind, before the regime took harsh actions to end democracy protests in Hong Kong, that region was China's most important conduit for foreign direct investment, and Chinese officials also used it to launder money. Yet with the new national security law in place, it's much more difficult to hide from the centralized authorities in the mainland, meaning they can't do things like that like they used to. And also they get hit by US sanctions, meaning, again, they've lost a lot of these trade benefits. Now, what really made Hong Kong stand out, though, was its rule of law, which was more in line with Western standards. And this also played an important role with the financial and investment communities when it comes to people from abroad putting money into China, since it had a relatively good reputation for seamless access to global financial markets, fair courts, and also an independent central bank. Now, this came down to Hong Kong's agreements on freedom, democracy, and autonomy. Yet all of this is now lost. And as the CCP tries to establish Shenzhen now as its replacement, it will be a replacement without the independence and rule of law that made Hong Kong unique from the rest of China under the Communist Party. Now, Hong Kong was also where big companies and banks from mainland China went to deal in US dollars. And this was a system the Chinese Communist Party relied on heavily when it came to international business. Yet in response to the CCP's forceful end of Hong Kong's autonomy, the United States downgraded its special financial privileges it used to give Hong Kong, and it no longer views Hong Kong as being independent from the Chinese Communist Party in the mainland. This is combined with the sanctions that have been placed on Chinese officials and businesses that were involved in ending Hong Kong's autonomy. The move sent shockwaves for the Chinese Communist Party, since rather than sanction the CCP itself, the United States demonstrated that if individual party officials and businesses could be held accountable if they followed the orders of the CCP and its leadership. And even more sanctions are now expected to follow that. Now take this into context of what's now happening. The Chinese Communist Party is rushing out its digital currency amid fears that its financial institutions may get cut off from the international markets. They're talking about this publicly. Its high-tech industry is taking deep hits from bans on the sale of chips. That's basically undermining all of its economic plans when it comes to China 2025 and other ones looking to the future of China's high-tech industries. Many countries as well, including the United States and Japan, are pulling their supply chains out of China, meaning China may no longer be the manufacturing hub of the world. Yet as this happens, foreign investors are still willing to pour money into China. And keep in mind the context of this. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party says the country is bouncing back from COVID-19, the CCP virus. It launched a huge propaganda campaign saying there's a V-shaped recovery. Things are going to bounce back in China. Put your money in now, you'll make a lot of money off it. A lot of investors are pouring money into it, and a lot of media promoted this for them. Now, for the CCP, the issue it's faced with is the prospect of losing foreign manufacturing and potentially even some of its ability to trade in the US dollar. Yet at the same time, foreign investors are still willing to give it cash. The regime is likely hedging its bets on this. It needs a new location that can replace the foreign perceptions that Hong Kong once enjoyed. It needs its currency independent of the US dollar in case it gets sanctioned, and also outside the reach of the United States in that regard. And it needs also to maintain a happy and prosperous image to show to investors around the world so they don't get scared away. In Shenzhen, we see all of this now playing out. So again, what are we seeing here when it comes to Shenzhen, when it comes to what the CCP is doing? The Chinese Communist Party is propping up Shenzhen as its Hong Kong replacement. It's a very sloppy, slapshot replacement because it lacks the perceptions that Hong Kong once enjoyed. It lacks the perceptions and international trade deals, special trade status that Hong Kong once enjoyed. The CCP is giving it special status within China and trying to lure foreign investment into China through that. The big question is this, though. Can they maintain the same economic levels? Can they maintain economic growth to keep investors pouring money into the country? Well, we'll have to see how this develops. Their big program right now for this alleged V-shaped recovery is, again, these mega projects, the same thing it's been doing for years, and also the One Belt, One Road initiative, as it goes to other countries and tries to build these big mega projects as well. Now, again, we'll have to see how this develops. We'll also be keeping you all updated as it goes forward. In the United States, radical groups are tearing down and defacing statues and monuments. Journalists and academics are rewriting the history of the country. Protesters and politicians are calling to defund the police. These forces at work look to radically remake the United States. Yet according to Curtis Bowers, these movements should have been expected. A decade ago, he wrote and directed the film Agenda Grinding America Down, which warned about communist groups working on agendas that align closely with what the United States is now facing. And we recently had the pleasure of speaking with Curtis Bowers about his films and his warnings to America. Let's jump into that now. Hey, Curtis Bowers, it's great having you on Crossroads.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great. So you did these two documentaries, these agenda films, and you talk about these different subversive movements that had taken root in the United States. You do a great job of explaining them, and you explain the ideology underlying them. And, like I mentioned off camera, you're quite the canary in the coal mine. You warned us. You warned the world about exactly what we're seeing take place now on the surface in the United States. And a lot of people never saw it coming. You saw it coming. Tell us about the process of your coming to realize these things, of coming to see what was taking place in this country that motivated you to make those movies.
Well, I think most people realize America has changed a lot over their lifetime. And as a father, I noticed that and started to dig in and said, why has it been changing so much? And always in the wrong direction. And as I dug in and studied, the evidence is overwhelming that the changes that have taken place are purposeful. It's not an accident that America is declining. It's purposeful. One of the key things, which I'm sure you've talked about before on the air, was the list of 45 current communist goals that were read into the congressional record in 1963. But as I read through that list, I could not believe how specific their agenda had been to grind us down from within. It wasn't some vague thing. I mean, goal 17, this is why we're seeing the problems we're seeing today. Get control of the schools and use them as transmission belts for socialism, soften the curriculum. Well, 50 years ago, they said we've got to get the children because we know if we have the children, we have everything. And we're going to teach them socialist ideas. All of us are waking up to go, why do 70% of our young people want socialism when it doesn't work? It's proven over and over again it cannot work. Well, that's why they had an agenda to do that. And on it goes through how they were going to infiltrate the churches and media and subvert the culture from within. So I saw those lists. When your enemy gives you a list of, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then you see they've done it, that got my attention as a father, especially, because I thought, wait a minute, my children, if we keep going down the road we're headed, we're going to get there. And I've got to do something. And that's what motivated me to make a movie, because I said, I have to have done something. So when they say, Dad, why didn't you do something? I said, I did, I tried. But it's so obvious if you go back and read their books, their articles, their speeches. They have been checking off their agenda now for about 100 years.
Now, I know that part of your research on this, you actually went to some of these meetings, met with some individuals who were actually talking about launching these programs, exactly what they were doing, told you themselves. What were some of the things you heard? I mean, because a lot of people, when they think about socialism, they're like, oh, what do you mean, like, sharing? What do you mean, like, taxing the wealthy? They don't understand the idea that it might include things like, for example, subverting, the media, subverting the church, like the World Council of Churches, like the Soviets did. They don't understand that it might entail attacking the family unit. And these are foreign concepts to a lot of people, but I understand in your research you met people who talked about this, who said, yes, this is what we're doing. What were some of the things you were told?
Well, back in 1992, I went to a meeting at University of California, Berkeley, where the Communist Party USA was breaking off a new group called the Committees of Correspondence. Sounds so wonderful. It always does. And they were starting this new group to more go after the culture, after just behind the scenes things of influence. And at that meeting, and by the way, the opening day of the conference, I came into this room. I was dressed like a college radical because I thought that's what it was going to be like because it was at Berkeley, but it wasn't. It was all 50, 60, and 70-year-olds with briefcases, about 1,400 of them. And I sat next to this black lady. We were having a nice conversation. And right as it started going, all of a sudden they said, before we move forward, we want to honor someone that's done so much for our cause. Miss Angela Davis of the Black Panthers. And it was the lady I'd been talking to. I've got a picture of me and her together. And so, but they said, we're going to rock the morality. We're going to take the family down. And we are going to try to destroy the free enterprise system. That was the three main things they talked about. And back then, this is 92, so it's almost been 30 years ago. They said, we feel the only thing that will be capable of taking down the free enterprise system is the environmental movement. We feel if we get behind that, it will create enough regulation and red tape to just make it hard to do business in America. And look where we've come. And then finally, for the family, they say we need to continue getting the children away into government programs at the youngest age possible, and then keep pushing the feminist movement to make women discontent with marriage and motherhood, because they knew they had to break down the family so that they can get the children. It's always about the children, because they know the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. They wanted that woman's job because they knew it's the most powerful job in the world. And so they convinced her, oh, go do something else. We'll take care of the kids for you. And that's why we see the change we have seen, because they have raised the children.
You know, you get into some interesting points here, which is the ideas of using existing systems within a society and altering the trajectory of these things to serve a political goal. This is classic Hegelian dialectic, what you're seeing here, seizing a process in motion, right? The Hegelian dialectic of altering the nature of a process in motion, using it to achieve a different goal. Marx, of course, took the Hegelian dialectic and altered it into dialectical materialism, which is identify, contradict, and eliminate the middle. And that is the basic formula for manufacturing a communist movement. You look at whatever cultural foundation exists in a society. What do you want to destroy? What is the opposite of that value you're trying to destroy? And then how do you build a movement around the inversion of it in order to agitate it, wear it down, and destroy it? I think in your documentary you did a great job at explaining that, grinding down America, as you say directly in the title, grinding America down. This grinding down through that dialectical process. Actually, I know in your documentary you did a great job of explaining the long march theory using the dialectical process. Can you explain to us how that typically works?
Right. Well, Antonio Gramsci is the genius that came up with that. He had realized if you want worldwide communism, a revolution's not going to work in just every country. It's not going to work specifically in the countries that believe in God, because we believe thou shalt not kill. And so they know people aren't going to rise up and kill each other off. He went to the Soviet Union and talked to Lenin about that and said, hey, if you want world communism, you're going to have to use a different strategy in countries that believe in God. And Lenin said, no way, we're going to have a world revolution, and kicked him out of Russia. And he went back to Italy. He was thrown in prison by Mussolini, and there he spent the rest of his life. And he's the one that wrote down a 2,000-page book called Notes from Prison. He wrote down the strategy. He said you have to infiltrate the institutions of influence and use those to change the people from within. So you're over time, through education, through media, through entertainment, you are slowly changing the people themselves. And he said, till one day you'll awake and you will have a people that not only want what you're selling, they'll need it. Because the moral fiber will have been broken down, the character so much. They need big government. They literally can't take care of themselves. They have not the character or the virtue to do that. And so that's what has happened. And that's why they've been so successful, because as they keep dumbing each generation of Americans down, and they keep doing what Karl Marx said, The first battlefield is the rewriting of history. So they don't know where they came from, which means they don't know where they're going to be going. And so they're in confusion. And then you hit them with so many attacks like you were talking about, and you guys always are addressing so many attacks. They don't know what to do. You're being overwhelmed. What's going on? And you never have time to stop and reflect and to focus in and to figure out, okay, what is this? What is this? And that's what has happened. But Antonio Gramsci was the brains behind that philosophy, and it has been the marching orders of the left ever since.
Yeah, and of course, we see many groups doing this now. This is one of the big pieces of it too. It's not one unified group carrying out these operations. It's not one single conspiracy, I guess we could call it. It's many groups doing it. We can look at the Fabian Society, the idea of their logo, the wolf in sheep's clothing. That was the idea of infiltrating the institutions, gaining high-level positions within them, and then redirecting them to serve the interests of the communist movement. Again, Hegelian dialectic, right? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's the basis of it, right? We can look, for example, at the Chinese Communist Party, one of the main communist systems in the world today. And I talk about it often on the show, of the system of what they would call the United Front Work Department, infiltrating, subverting the guiding systems of a society, the elite of a society, political systems, business leaders, entertainment industry, journalists, academics. You seize control of those, you control the direction of a society. They have an entire government branch dedicated to this. And I think you've done a good job of explaining really, you talk about the surface structures, but you talk about the guiding ideology behind these things. Now, I'm curious in terms of what we see on the surface now. It's interesting with Black Lives Matter, for example. Some of the founders of it have said that, it's not the movement that I joined. It's not what it was when I started. There are people saying it's been subverted, that there are radical individuals who've taken control of the movement and turned it into something they never wanted it to be. I've personally spoken with police officers. They say that actually, one of the ways they dealt with the protests and riots was just through engagement. They said, apparently, what I was told is that the people who were causing the violence, who were doing a lot of the crimes, the serious stuff, were coming in from outside the counties a lot of times. And so when they saw those people coming in, they would alert the local legitimate leaders of these movements, like them or don't like them, of course that's your choice. They would alert them, and oftentimes they would not hold the protest because they didn't want to be affiliated with these radical elements trying to subvert their movement. But we see this, the idea that a radical movement, and for those of you who watch this show, we had Trevor Loudon on recently who talked specifically by name of these organizations that have in fact orchestrated a lot of these riots, most of them through Freedom Road Socialists, and two different branches of it. And really, again, we're seeing this happen right now. I'm curious, based on your analysis and this agenda, again, we're seeing it take place broad as day, on the surface. Democratic Socialists of America, even on their Twitter page, a lot of their main operatives are talking directly about the revolution. A lot of the groups, Communist Party USA, these different radical socialist organizations, the term they're using now is revolution, as things are unfolding right now on the surface, plain as day for us to see. What is the agenda behind this?
Well, I think what Americans need to understand is that all of these things coordinated together, they're organized, they're purposeful, and it is really simply a Marxist revolution to take us down from within. It's not anything else. It's not any well-meaning things going on. It is that these movements have been captured and focused and organized to do that. And that's an important thing for Americans to understand, so they're not disillusioned or buy into the lie that, these things are really well-meaning. They only have one goal in mind, and that is to take America down.
Hey, Curtis Bowers, really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Now, folks, again, we're broadcasting 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And also on Sundays, we do a live Q&A, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to support us also, please consider joining us on Patreon. You can find the link to that in the description below. If you haven't already also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel. And if you want to go the extra mile, as always, you can tell a friend or family member about Crossroads. Now, with that said, folks, stay informed and stay free.